Stand still. I need everyone to see what you really are. Valerie Thompson's voice cut through the gallery as he lifted the porcelain vase above Amy Cook's head. The 19-year-old's ice-blue eyes gleamed as he upended it, water, orchids, and black soil cascading over her face. His platinum blonde hair caught the light as he stepped back, his friends' laughter erupting around them. This is perfect. Madison squealed, filming. #KnowYourPlace. Vanessa Thompson smiled behind her champagne. She looks more authentic now. Richard Thompson circled closer. These pieces aren't for just anyone, Miss Cook. Amy stood motionless, soil dripping down her elegant gown. Her dark eyes held absolute calm, the certainty of someone who knew rescue was coming. None of them understood they'd just humiliated the woman G. Linton loved. And when the city's most feared mafia boss saw this video, their wealth would mean nothing. The Thompson Estates gallery glittered with privilege and priceless art. Amy Cook, 38-year-old CEO of Crown and Compass Hospitality, moved through the charity auction with quiet grace, ignoring dismissive glances from old money families who saw her as an interloper. They saw her success, her impeccable taste, her self-made empire. They didn't see her most guarded secret, G. Linton, the Korean-American mafia boss who controlled 3 states' underworld with ruthless precision. To criminals, he was a legend. To Amy, he was everything. Their relationship remained hidden by design, keeping her business clean and separate. Tonight was simple. Maintain appearances, keep worlds divided. Then Valerie Thompson, 19, entitled Cruel, spotted her examining a Caravaggio. His approach was theatrical, friends filming, parents watching. The vase was already in his hands. What happened next would teach the Thompsons why you never touch what belongs to a mafia king. Amy walked through the Thompson Estates marble foyer as soil continued dripping from her hair, each step deliberately measured. Staff rushed forward with towels and stammered apologies, but she raised one hand, silencing them without a word. Their horrified faces told her everything. The video was already spreading, the damage already done. She pushed through the ornate doors into the cool night air where her driver waited, his expression carefully neutral as he opened the Mercedes door. The moment the privacy partition rose, Amy reached for her phone. 3 calls, each lasting less than 30 seconds. Her attorney, Marcus Chen, answered on the first ring. Pull everything. Every contract, every partnership proposal, every Thompson connection. Her PR director, Sarah Martinez, received identical instructions wrapped in professional urgency. The third call required different language entirely. Marcus, she said to her head of security, her tone shifting to something colder, I need a complete workup. No restrictions. You know what I mean. The penthouse greeted her with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city, a view she'd earned through 15 years of relentless ambition. Amy walked directly to her bathroom, stripped off the ruined gown, and stepped under scalding water. The soil swirled down the drain in dark rivulets, but the memory calcified into something harder, sharper. Not the humiliation itself, but their absolute certainty that she would absorb it, accept it, disappear quietly back to wherever people like her belonged. By midnight, #Thompson Gala was trending. Valerie's cruelty, his friends' laughter, his parents' validation, all immortalized in high definition. By dawn, Amy released her statement. Crown and Compass was severing all business relationships with Thompson-affiliated entities, effective immediately. The financial impact hit before Wall Street opened. 3 major development deals collapsed within hours. Society pages that had praised the Thompsons' philanthropy suddenly questioned their judgment and values. In boardrooms across the city, executives whispered about the Thompsons' liability problem. Amy watched the markets move from her office, coffee untouched, her expression unreadable. This was only the opening move. Marcus arrived at Amy's office at precisely 9 a.m., carrying a leather portfolio that looked inconspicuous but contained enough evidence to dismantle a dynasty. He set it on her desk without ceremony, his expression grim. They've been sloppy for years. Arrogant people always are. Amy opened the file as Marcus walked her through the findings. The Thompson fortune was a masterclass in financial fiction, shell companies layered within offshore accounts, their charity foundation funneling donations through subsidiaries that existed only on paper. Tax evasion so blatant it suggested they believed themselves immune to scrutiny. Their political protection wasn't earned through legitimate influence but purchased with blackmail, compromising photographs and financial records weaponized against officials who'd made the mistake of accepting Thompson hospitality. "There's more," Marcus said, pulling up surveillance footage on her screen. Valerie Thompson emerged in grainy security camera recordings spanning 3 years, shoving a hotel maid in Aspen, verbally assaulting a restaurant server in Miami, physically threatening a valet in Manhattan. Each incident followed by phone calls from Thompson family attorneys, settlements signed with ironclad NDAs, victims disappearing into silence purchased with strategic amounts of money. "His friends?" Amy asked, her voice clinical. "Same pattern. Different crimes." Marcus opened additional files. Madison Pierce's family runs escort services that aren't entirely consensual. Blake Montgomery's father has SEC violations buried under 6 layers of legal maneuvering. They're not just entitled, they're a criminal ecosystem protecting each other. Amy closed the portfolio, her decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. This wouldn't be the quick, violent retribution her rage demanded. This would be surgical, methodical, devastating. She'd let them destroy themselves while she orchestrated every collapse from positions they'd never see. "Start acquiring their debt," she instructed. "Shell companies only. Nothing traceable. I want leverage before they realize the ground is shifting." Marcus nodded, already reaching for his phone. Within hours, the invisible machinery began moving, purchasing Thompson obligations through entities that existed only in filing cabinets and encrypted servers. The Thompsons were already falling. They just didn't know it yet. The lawsuit arrived via courier on a Thursday morning, 48 hours after Amy's withdrawal statement had sent Thompson stock into freefall. Marcus Chen set the documents on her desk with a wry expression. "They're suing for defamation and tortious interference. Asking for $200 million in damages." Amy scanned the filing, recognizing the law firm's letterhead immediately. Kirkland & Walsh, the kind of white shoe firm that specialized in destroying reputations while maintaining plausible deniability. The language was carefully crafted. Amy Cook had made reckless and unfounded accusations that damaged the Thompson family's sterling reputation. She had acted with malicious intent, driven by emotional instability and a pattern of aggressive behavior inconsistent with professional business standards. The character assassination began subtly that afternoon. Anonymous sources speaking to business journalists, carefully worded questions about Amy's temperament and background. By evening, the whispers had crystallized into a narrative. Amy's mother had struggled with addiction. Amy herself had spent time in foster care. These facts, true, painful, irrelevant, were weaponized to suggest instability, to paint her success as somehow suspect, her reaction to public humiliation as evidence of deep-seated psychological issues rather than justified outrage. The press conference aired at 6 p.m. Richard Thompson stood behind a podium flanked by his attorneys, his expression projecting wounded dignity. "What happened at our gala was an unfortunate accident," he began, his voice measured and reasonable. "A young man's poor judgment in a moment of exuberance." But Ms. Cook's response, destroying business relationships, making inflammatory public statements, reveals a pattern of behavior that concerns us deeply. Vanessa Thompson dabbed at dry eyes. "We've tried to reach out privately, to apologize and make amends. But she's responded with vindictiveness that frankly seems disproportionate. We worry about someone with such anger issues controlling a major hospitality company." The lawyers took over, never explicitly mentioning race or class but invoking every stereotype with surgical precision. Victim mentality, disproportionate emotional response, questions about her fitness for corporate leadership. The subtext screamed what they couldn't say directly: she doesn't belong here, and her reaction proves it. Amy watched from her office, Marcus and Sarah Martinez flanking her. She recognized the playbook because she'd seen it deployed against others: attack credibility, wrap bigotry in professional concern, make the victim defend their right to be hurt. It was effective because it worked on unconscious bias, on the comfort people found in believing successful black women were somehow inherently unstable, that their achievements were flukes waiting to be exposed. "They think I'll play defense," Amy said quietly, turning off the screen. "They think I'll spend my energy proving I'm not angry, not emotional, not everything they're insinuating." She reached for her phone, texting her board members, "Emergency meeting, tomorrow 8 a.m. Attendance mandatory." The next morning, 12 board members filled Crown and Compass's conference room, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly nervous. Amy stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding despite, or perhaps because of, the calculated attacks on her character. "I'm not defending myself against their accusations," she began. "I'm going on offense. Crown and Compass will lead an industry-wide ethics coalition examining problematic patterns in family-run charitable foundations. We'll be partnering with investigative journalists, nonprofit watchdog groups, and regulatory agencies." She pulled up a presentation. "We're not targeting the Thompsons specifically. We're examining systemic issues, tax evasion, labor violations, financial irregularities. If the Thompsons happen to exemplify these patterns, well, that's simply unfortunate." The board members exchanged glances. This wasn't retreat. This was war. The encrypted message arrived at 2 a.m., Thompson Security. Former. Have what you need. Alone only. Marcus ran the digital signature and confirmed the sender was James Whitmore, terminated from the Thompson estate 3 weeks prior for philosophical differences, corporate speak for questioning why the family kept covering up their son's assaults. Amy met him in a downtown parking garage at dawn, Marcus positioned on the level above with a clear sightline. Whitmore emerged from the shadows looking like a man who'd stopped sleeping, mid-50s, military posture compromised by exhaustion, carrying a weathered messenger bag like it contained explosives. "I kept copies," he said without preamble, handing Amy a USB drive. 5 years of security footage they thought I deleted. I told myself it was insurance, that I'd never actually use it. Then I saw what that little bastard did to you, and I realized I'd been protecting monsters." Amy plugged the drive into her laptop, and Marcus's tech specialist remotely verified it wasn't compromised. The first video showed Valerie at 17, shoving a housekeeper against a wall hard enough to leave bruises, screaming obscenities while his mother walked past without intervening. The next showed Thompson Sr. in his study, accepting a briefcase from a city councilman, both men's body language speaking volumes about the transaction's nature. But it was the third set of files that changed everything. Thompson Jr., Richard, Valerie's father, sitting in a private club with 3 men. Marcus's facial recognition software immediately flagged. Known traffickers, Eastern European networks specializing in transportation services that were anything but legitimate. The audio was clear. Richard discussing investment opportunities in their distribution infrastructure, routes that moved people like cargo. "How long?" Amy asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Years. Maybe decades. They're careful, but not careful enough." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "I stayed because the pay was good and I told myself it wasn't my business. Watching you stand up made me realize what a coward I'd become." Marcus Chen reviewed the footage that afternoon, his expression growing darker with each file. Amy's syndicate forensic accountant. A woman who'd unraveled cartel finances for the DIA before joining the private sector, traced the Thompson Foundation's offshore accounts through layers of shell companies. The money led exactly where the footage suggested: investments in shipping companies that transported human cargo, real estate holdings that housed illegal operations, financial networks that laundered profits from exploitation. Amy sat in her office as reports accumulated, feeling something shift in her understanding. She'd assumed the Thompsons were merely entitled aristocrats playing with inherited wealth, cruel but ultimately harmless parasites. The evidence revealed something far worse. They were actual predators, their respectability a carefully constructed facade hiding decades of criminal enterprise. They trafficked in human suffering while hosting charity galas and collecting art. They were exactly the kind of corruption Amy's syndicate existed to eliminate, and they'd made the fatal mistake of thinking she was weak enough to humiliate publicly. "Confirm authenticity for legal proceedings," Amy instructed Marcus Chen. "And send copies to our other Marcus. He'll want to see what kind of people just declared war on us." The attorney confirmed admissibility within hours. The evidence was devastating, authentic, and completely legal to possess. The Thompsons had just given Amy everything she needed to destroy them in both her worlds. The legitimate courts and the criminal underground that had its own brutal justice for traffickers. The State Commerce Department's investigation notice arrived via official letterhead, bureaucratic language masking the political pressure behind it. Crown and Compass Hospitality was being audited for irregularities in financial reporting and potential violations of corporate governance standards. Amy recognized the Thompson fingerprints immediately. The deputy director was Richard Thompson's college roommate, appointed through connections rather than competence. Within 48 hours, 3 banks froze Crown and Compass accounts pending routine compliance reviews. The timing was surgical, coordinated, designed to strangle her company's operations. Payroll deadlines loomed. Vendor payments stalled. The message was clear: capitulate or watch your empire collapse from manufactured financial pressure. Then Valerie posted his video. He sat in the Thompson Estates library, surrounded by leather-bound books he'd probably never read, his platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, ice blue eyes burning with entitled righteousness. "We're seeing a disturbing trend in American business," he began, his tone mimicking the pundits he'd grown up watching. "People who don't understand our values, our traditions, trying to force their way into spaces they haven't earned." Amy Cook represents this perfectly. Someone who mistakes a seat at the table for belonging at the table. His followers erupted. Within hours, #KnowYourPlace was trending again, this time amplified by accounts that turned Amy into a symbol of everything they resented. Diversity initiatives, affirmative action, outsiders, gaining power they believed belonged to people like them. The video went viral in particular circles, not mainstream, but loud enough to matter, coordinated enough to damage. Corporate partners started calling, not to support, but to distance. Given the controversy, until things settle down, our shareholders are concerned. The emergency board meeting felt like an ambush. 12 members, but only 6 met Amy's eyes when she entered. Gerald Morrison, the longest-serving board member, spoke first. "Amy, we need to discuss our options. The financial pressure, the investigations, the public sentiment in certain markets." "You want me to settle," Amy said, "not a question." "We want to protect the company," another board member interjected. "Perhaps a joint statement with the Thompsons. Acknowledge the misunderstanding. Move forward. Apologize for being publicly humiliated?" Amy's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered beneath the surface. "Validate their narrative that I overreacted, that I don't belong?" "It's pragmatic," Morrison said carefully. "Sometimes we need to." "No." Amy stood, her presence filling the room. "I didn't build this company by backing down from bullies. I built it by removing them. The Thompsons think freezing some accounts and launching a smear campaign will break me. They're wrong." She pulled up documents on the screen, James Whitmore's footage, the forensic accounting trails, everything Marcus had compiled. "They're not just entitled aristocrats. They're criminals, human traffickers hiding behind charity galas. And I have proof." The board members stared at the evidence, their expressions shifting from nervous to stunned. "We're not settling," Amy continued. "We're going to war. Anyone who can't stomach that can resign effective immediately. But I promise you, when this is over, Crown and Compass will still be standing. The Thompsons won't." The room remained silent. No one resigned. Amy walked out, already texting Marcus her next move. The Thompsons wanted escalation? She'd give them annihilation. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, carefully timed to dominate the business news cycle. Amy stood at the podium in Crown and Compass headquarters, flanked by the CEOs of Meridian Hotels, Constellation Hospitality, and Pacific Luxury Group, 3 industry giants who'd spent years trying to crack markets the Thompsons monopolized through legacy connections and strategic intimidation. "Today marks a new era in luxury hospitality," Amy began, her voice steady and confident. "Crown and Compass is proud to announce strategic partnerships that will reshape how our industry approaches ethics, transparency, and worker dignity." The partnerships were real, substantive, and devastating to Thompson interests. Combined, the 4 companies controlled enough market share to make the Thompson brand irrelevant. But the true damage came from what followed. Sarah Martinez had spent 2 weeks locating former Thompson employees willing to speak on record. A housekeeper described being assaulted by Valerie and then pressured to sign an NDA for $20,000. A hotel manager detailed systematic wage theft masked as administrative errors. A groundskeeper explained how workers who complained simply disappeared from the payroll, replaced by desperate people who wouldn't question their treatment. We're not just building businesses, Amy concluded. We're building accountability. What the cameras didn't see was the simultaneous operation unfolding across the city. Marcus's network moved with surgical precision, applying pressure the Thompsons would never connect to Amy Cook. The state deputy director who'd launched the Crown and Compass investigation woke to find federal agents on his doorstep, asking about unreported income and suspiciously timed stock purchases. An anonymous tip, untraceable, perfectly documented, had triggered an FBI corruption probe. 2 city councilmen who'd voted to block Amy's development projects suddenly faced ethics investigations. Their Thompson-funded campaign contributions, previously buried in disclosure filings, were now front-page news thanks to Concerned Citizen reports that arrived at newspaper offices in unmarked envelopes. Thompson business partners began receiving anonymous packages containing financial analysis showing the family's deteriorating position, their over-leveraged properties, their vulnerability. One by one, these partners found reasons to distance themselves. Market conditions, strategic realignment, fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Vincent Calabrese had laundered Thompson money for 15 years, moving their trafficking profits through legitimate businesses with the skill of a maestro conducting a symphony. Marcus's people found him through the same networks that had made him valuable to the Thompsons, and offered him something better than money: immunity. Calabrese met Amy in a hotel suite she'd swept for surveillance 3 times. He arrived carrying 2 decades of documentation, every transaction, every account, every shell company the Thompsons had used to hide their criminal enterprise. Bank records showing payments to traffickers. Transfer orders routing money from exploitation to investment. The complete financial architecture of their empire. They treated me like the help, Calabrese said, his Italian accent thick with resentment. 20 years, and Richard still couldn't remember my name. Called me, the accountant, like I was furniture. Amy accepted the files, knowing they represented the Thompsons' complete destruction. Between James Whitmore's footage and Calabrese's documentation, she could prove not just individual crimes but systematic criminal enterprise spanning decades. Meanwhile, the Thompsons huddled in emergency meetings, watching their world collapse without understanding why. They saw Amy's public partnerships, her employee testimonials, her PR victories. They recognized corporate warfare. They didn't see the invisible hand orchestrating every political investigation, every business partner's retreat, every avenue of protection systematically eliminated. They didn't recognize that they weren't just fighting a CEO, they were fighting an organization that had perfected the art of destroying enemies without leaving fingerprints. Richard Thompson told his lawyers to escalate. They had no idea how badly they'd already lost. The video dropped on a Friday afternoon, released simultaneously to major news outlets with a statement from Kirkland & Walsh that read like a prosecutor's indictment. New evidence has emerged that fundamentally changes the narrative surrounding the Thompson Foundation Gala incident, the press release began. Security footage clearly shows Ms. Cook initiating aggressive contact with Valerie Thompson, making explicit threats against him and his family. The footage appeared authentic at first glance, Amy approaching Valerie near the gallery in trance, her body language tense, her finger pointing at his chest. The audio quality was suspiciously clear for ambient recording, capturing what sounded like Amy's voice. "You and your family have no idea who you're dealing with. I will destroy everything you have." Valerie backing away, looking genuinely frightened. Then the cut to the later incident, reframed as defensive response to intimidation. Richard Thompson appeared on 3 news networks within the hour, his expression grave and disappointed. "We wanted to protect Ms. Cook's privacy, to handle this quietly. But she's forced our hand. Our son was defending himself against someone who explicitly threatened violence. We have witnesses who will testify to her aggressive behavior throughout the evening." The response was immediate and brutal. Social media erupted with debates about who was lying. Business networks ran segments questioning Amy's temperament. By evening, Constellation Hospitality, one of her new strategic partners, issued a statement. "In light of emerging evidence and ongoing controversy, Constellation is postponing our partnership pending further investigation. The emergency board meeting was called for Sunday morning, 48 hours after the video's release. Amy arrived to find her supporters outnumbered by members who'd been silent during previous meetings but now found their voices. Morrison led the charge, his tone apologetic but firm. "Amy, we need to discuss interim leadership while this situation resolves. The optics are that you're considering removing me based on fabricated evidence," Amy interrupted, her voice ice. "You can't know it's fabricated," another board member said. "The footage looks authentic. Multiple news organizations have verified the metadata." Then they didn't look hard enough. Amy opened her laptop, connecting to the conference room display. "Marcus, walk them through what you found." Marcus's tech specialist, a woman named Chen who'd worked digital forensics for the NSA before going private, appeared via video conference. "The Thompson video is sophisticated, but not sophisticated enough. First, the metadata shows compilation from 4 different source files, each recorded on different devices at different times. The ambient audio doesn't match the room acoustics. It was recorded in a smaller space and layered over the video." She pulled up a split-screen comparison. "But the fatal flaw is here." She zoomed in on a window reflection visible behind Amy in the doctored footage. This reflection shows 2 figures, supposedly Amy and Valerie. But the angles are wrong. Valerie's reflected position doesn't match his actual position in the frame. They inserted him from a different video, probably from earlier in the evening, and didn't account for the reflection physics. Chen displayed the forensic analysis, color grading inconsistencies, compression artifacts showing multiple encoding passes, audio waveforms that didn't align with lip movements. This isn't security footage. It's a composite created from multiple sources, edited to create a false narrative. Whoever made this knew what they were doing, but they got sloppy with the reflection. The board members stared at the evidence, their expressions shifting from skeptical to stunned to horrified. "They didn't just lie about what happened," Amy said quietly. "They manufactured false evidence and submitted it to media outlets as authentic security footage. That's not civil litigation, that's criminal fraud. They've committed federal crimes to try destroying my reputation." Morrison leaned back in his chair, the color draining from his face. "Do we have this documented? Certified by experts?" "Chen's report will hold up in any court," Marcus confirmed. "We've also identified the editing software used and traced the original source files. The Thompsons didn't just doctor evidence, they were stupid enough to leave a digital trail." Amy closed her laptop, surveying the board members who'd been ready to remove her hours earlier. The Thompsons are desperate. They're watching their empire collapse and they're willing to commit crimes to stop it. This video isn't just their final play, it's proof they'll do anything to win. She stood, her presence commanding absolute attention. "We're not postponing anything. We're accelerating. Monday morning, I'm holding a press conference revealing not just the doctored video, but everything else we've found. The trafficking connections, the financial fraud, the decades of criminal enterprise. We're ending this." The vote to support Amy's strategy was unanimous. Outside, in a car parked 3 blocks away, Amy allowed herself a moment of exhaustion. The Thompsons had almost succeeded. For 48 hours, she'd faced the possibility that their willingness to completely fabricate reality might actually work, that lies wrapped in sophisticated technology could override truth. But they'd made the same mistake they'd been making all along, they'd underestimated her. They'd seen a CEO and missed the strategist. They'd seen a victim and missed the predator. Now she had everything. Their real crimes and their manufactured ones. The evidence that would destroy them in legitimate courts and the proof that would eliminate any protection their lawyers might provide. Monday would be brutal, but it would be final. The press conference began at 9 a.m. sharp, every major network carrying it live. Amy stood at the podium in a charcoal suit, her expression calm and professional, flanked by Marcus Chen, her attorney, and Chen, her forensic specialist. Behind them, a screen displayed the Crown and Compass logo, not defensive, not apologetic, but projecting absolute confidence. 3 days ago, the Thompson family released what they claimed was security footage proving I threatened their son, Amy began, her voice steady. That footage was a complete fabrication. Chen, please walk the media through your findings. The forensic specialist's presentation was devastating in its technical precision. She showed the metadata inconsistencies, the reflection anomaly, the audio layering, the compression artifacts. News organizations that had run the Thompson video without verification now watched their credibility evaporate in real time. This wasn't an error or misunderstanding, Chen concluded. This was deliberate fabrication of evidence submitted to media outlets as authentic documentation. That's federal fraud. Amy let the implications settle before continuing. But the fabricated video isn't the real story. The real story is why the Thompsons were desperate enough to commit federal crimes. The answer lies in what they've been hiding for decades. James Whitmore's footage played on the screen, Valerie assaulting staff, Richard accepting bribes, the meetings with known traffickers. Amy narrated with clinical precision, each revelation building on the last. The Thompson Foundation isn't a charity, it's a money laundering operation. Their business empire isn't built on acumen, it's built on exploitation and criminal enterprise. Vincent Calabresi's documentation followed, financial trails showing millions moved from trafficking operations through shell companies, investments in properties used for illegal activities, payments to corrupt officials. Amy presented it not as personal vendetta but as public service, her tone measured and professional. These aren't allegations. These are documented facts supported by financial records, security footage, and testimony from former Thompson employees who've lived in fear for years. The press room erupted with questions, but Amy raised one hand for silence. I'm not the victim in this story. The victims are the people the Thompsons have exploited, assaulted, and trafficked for profit. The housekeepers Valerie assaulted who were paid to stay silent. The workers systematically cheated of wages. The vulnerable people moved through their trafficking networks like cargo. This press conference is for them. What the cameras didn't capture was the synchronized operation unfolding across the city at that exact moment. Federal agents in tactical gear descended on Thompson properties simultaneously, the estate, their foundation offices, Richard's private club, their offshore account management firm. The raids weren't random. Anonymous tips had provided agents with precise locations of hidden safes, encrypted hard drives, documentation stored in places only someone with intimate knowledge of Thompson operations could know. In 6 different cities, traffickers connected to Thompson networks found themselves in handcuffs, their operations dismantled in coordinated arrests that suggested months of investigation. Corrupt officials who'd protected the Thompsons received dawn visits from internal affairs investigators armed with evidence of bribery, extortion, and abuse of office. The infrastructure that had protected the Thompson family for generations collapsed in under 4 hours. But the most devastating operation was reserved for Valerie. He was leaving his penthouse apartment when the elevator stopped between floors. The lights cut out. When emergency lighting flickered on, he was alone, but his phone displayed photos of him entering the building, walking through the lobby, stepping into the elevator. Real-time surveillance from sources he couldn't see. A text message appeared. You're being watched. Always. Everywhere. By people you'll never see coming. The elevator remained frozen for 20 minutes while Valerie's messages and calls went unanswered. When it finally moved, depositing him in the parking garage, his car was surrounded by security footage printed and placed on the windshield, images of him at school, at restaurants, at friends' homes. Each photo timestamped from the past week. For 24 hours, Valerie experienced what his victims had lived with for years, the absolute certainty of powerlessness. His security system at home displayed feeds from cameras that shouldn't exist. His computer opened files he'd deleted years ago. Every private space violated, every assumption of safety destroyed. No physical harm, just the psychological terror of knowing invisible forces could reach him anywhere, anytime, and he was completely helpless to stop them. When police found him the next morning, responding to a welfare check from his frantic parents, he was catatonic. Sitting in his locked apartment, staring at walls, unable to articulate what had happened. The only words he managed, they're everywhere. They see everything. I'm never safe. The psychiatric evaluation noted severe acute stress response and recommended immediate hospitalization. Back at the press conference, Amy fielded questions with professional composure, directing media to contact federal authorities for information about ongoing investigations. She didn't mention the raids, she didn't need to. Within an hour, news helicopters were broadcasting footage of federal agents carrying boxes from Thompson properties. Sarah Martinez handed Amy a phone showing breaking news alerts. FBI raids Thompson Foundation, human trafficking arrests linked to prominent family, corruption investigation engulfs Thompson business empire. Amy ended the press conference with simple words that would be quoted for years: "Accountability isn't revenge. It's justice. And justice doesn't negotiate with privilege." She walked off the podium knowing the Thompsons' world had ended. Not just damaged, ended. Their criminal enterprise exposed, their protection evaporated, their golden child psychologically shattered. The girl they'd humiliated with dirt and casual cruelty had systematically destroyed everything they'd built across generations, using both legitimate institutions and invisible networks they'd never known existed. And she'd done it without ever raising her voice. The federal courthouse became a theater of destruction over 6 months of legal proceedings. Thompson Sr. faced 32 counts of racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Richard Thompson Jr. was charged with 47 counts spanning decades of criminal enterprise. Their attorneys, the same Kirkland and Walsh team that had filed the defamation suit against Amy, withdrew from representation the moment fabricating evidence became part of the prosecution's case. The trial revealed everything. Vincent Calabrese testified for 3 days, walking prosecutors through financial schemes so complex they required charts covering entire walls. James Whitmore's footage played on courtroom monitors, forcing spectators to watch Valerie's assaults, Richard's bribe negotiations, the family's casual cruelty toward anyone they considered beneath them. Former employees testified about systematic abuse, wage theft, and the NDAs that had kept them silent for years. Valerie, still receiving psychiatric treatment at a private facility, provided testimony via video deposition. His cooperation agreement spared him prison in exchange for complete disclosure, but his social world had evaporated more thoroughly than any cell could achieve. The trust fund circles that had celebrated his cruelty now treated him like contamination. Everyone knew he'd broken the cardinal rule. He'd involved his family in consequences to save himself. Thompson Sr. received 25 years. Richard got 32. Their appeals were denied within months. The federal asset seizure claimed everything: the estate, the foundation properties, offshore accounts, investment portfolios accumulated across generations. The Thompson name, once synonymous with power and prestige, became shorthand for corrupt privilege finally facing accountability. Amy watched the auction of Thompson assets from her office, bidding through shell companies and legitimate business interests. The estate sold for 40% of its assessed value. Nobody wanted property associated with trafficking and fraud. Through a carefully structured series of purchases and donations coordinated between Crown and Compass and several nonprofit partners, the property transferred ownership multiple times before emerging as the Cook Foundation for Youth Empowerment. The foundation's opening ceremony drew hundreds: former Thompson employees who'd found their voices, youth advocacy groups, survivors of trafficking operations the Thompsons had funded. Amy stood on the same terrace where Valerie had dumped soil on her head 18 months earlier, but the space had been transformed. Where crystal chandeliers had hung, natural light now flooded through expanded windows. The gallery that displayed Renaissance masters now held art created by at-risk youth in the foundation's programs. Marcus stood in the crowd wearing a tailored suit instead of his usual street gear, looking profoundly uncomfortable but present nonetheless. He caught Amy's eye and nodded, a simple gesture carrying profound meaning. Both worlds she commanded, the legitimate and the underground, aligned in this moment. The CEO and the architect no longer compartmentalized but integrated into something stronger than either identity alone. "This foundation represents a simple truth," Amy said to the assembled crowd. "Power without accountability is just cruelty with resources. Real strength comes from building systems that protect the vulnerable rather than exploiting them." She finished her speech and walked through the estate's grand entrance, the same doors she'd exited that night with soil dripping from her hair, humiliation burning in her chest. But this time she owned them. The property, the narrative, the outcome, all hers. The girl from foster care who'd survived the streets, the syndicate strategist who'd eliminated threats without mercy, The CEO who'd built an empire through brilliance and determination. They weren't separate people anymore. They were one person, whole and integrated, wielding power from both worlds with the wisdom to know when each was necessary. Amy Cook stepped into the sunlight, utterly unbreakable, having transformed personal humiliation into lasting systemic change. The Thompsons had tried to remind her of her place. Instead, she'd shown them that some people don't have places, they take spaces and remake them entirely.